This conference will now be recorded.
Well, good morning and welcome to the second in the series of Friday the 13th Business Horrors with the Empress of Biz and Sal Acosta, who I call affectionately the Duke of Business. So, us royal couple here is going to talk, taking our combined experience. Oh, God, it has to be over 60 some years, and sharing the mistakes that we have seen either we've made or other people have made. And we thought this would be fun, sharing the business horror stories, take your mind off other issues that are floating around today. And hopefully, through our advice, you will not do any one of these. Good morning, Sal, and welcome.
Good morning, JoAnn. How are you today?
Well, I'm good as long as you're running the technology. Let's tell you that.
Well, I think we're good. So we're recording, and you look wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. I was thinking, um, because we're both in business and we both give advice and make deals, I was wondering, probably we need to be give some self-disclosure and talk about some of our biggest mistakes. And I'll start off because I'm the one that suggested it, and then we go on. But one of the biggest mistakes I made was we had developed software, my business partner and I, who's now deceased, Jim Martin. And he was so concerned, and I allowed him to be, that we, of investors and, um, potential angels, that type of thing, that he wouldn't let me bring in any other partners. He brought in his family. And while they were smart and they were, and one had certainly hit it big, um, the one who had hit it big was real important, real upfront, straight, that he didn't want to be running the things, he would be an advisor, which is what we wanted for. And the other one thought he wanted to be in business, but was working more in a corporate environment where everything's clean and sterile and pretty. And when he found out that what it was like working with small business owners and some of the places that you go to, he was like, "Oh my God, I can't go in there." And that was a big mistake. Um, and our software never really went where it needed to be, even though we had rave reviews from clients. So picking the right partners who understand that if they're going to invest in a small business, not everything is perfect. Not everything is like the corporate environment. That's real important, and that was a lesson that I learned along the way. That people who come in with expectations of everything to be clean, perfect, sterile, everything with the I's crossed and the dots crossed, they're not going to be your best partner. What about you?
Well, I will tell you, I will tell you two things that are kind of related from my entrepreneurial experience. And one was, even though the business actually ended up being very successful, but I think it could have been even more successful if it had been a different way. At one point, I was a franchisee for a mobile oil change business. Um, and two things that I remember about that. One is, quite honestly, my style and my temperament and maybe my self image wasn't really of a person going around, doing mobile oil changes. As I said, the business became successful because I hired the right people with the right skill sets, with the right interest. I mean, we were hiring people out of the vocational technical schools that had actually studied to be car mechanics. So if anything, we actually ended up having people that were quite honestly overqualified and had a great skill set for what the job actually entailed. Um, but it wasn't really a good fit with me and my interest and what I wanted to do. And so the question is, could it have been even more successful if I had picked a different franchise that would have been more aligned with my interests and what I knew how to do and so on and so forth? Or would it have been more successful if that business had been owned by somebody that maybe had that sort of auto mechanic, background and maybe as a kid, used to play around with cars or tractors on the farm or something like that. So I guess my advice there would be to anybody that's thinking of getting in business is to do a very sort of honest introspection of, are you matching up correctly? Are you lining up correctly with the business you're planning to buy or start or develop? Um, and the other thing that I'll say, and it was from the same situation, and I consider it as a failure because it's something that I could never figure out how to do. Is I could never teach or train these folks to do sort of the additional marginal sale. Okay, like how you at some points in times you go to McDonald's and they always say, "Oh, would you like fries with that?" Um, so when you're doing mobile oil changes out in the field, for the business to be really profitable, you have to sell the additional services. Okay. And I want to be very clear. We never sold anything that people didn't legitimately need. Okay. But I can guarantee you almost every car on the road needs some fluids topped off. That's just the nature of the beast. And the sale is not more complicated than saying to the car owner, hey, would you like me to check your fluids free of charge? And then if there's something slow, you tell them, and 9 times out of 10 they say yes, please go ahead and refill it because I don't want my whatever transmission oil to be low or my wiper fluids to be low, whatever the case may be. I did that when I was out in the field with these folks, but I could never get them to do that without me there. So those are kind of the two things that stick in my mind as things that could have been better, and in spite of being successful, it could have been much more successful.
How long did you keep that business?
Oh my God, kept it for quite a few years, grew it to several employees. Um, Used to make cash like crazy. And maybe that'll take me to the third point. And by the way, full disclosure, I in business I think there's never right or wrong answers. Okay, there's shades of grays, there's risk you can tolerate, things like that. But um, I was actually doing that while I was still actually working my corporate career because I was young. I had the time to do that. I had a supportive spouse. I had employees. So all of that was working fine, except at one point in my professional career, I got a really good job offer. I mean, and it was really good, but it was geographically far away from these operations where the client base was. I mean, there was just I didn't feel it could be moved. So long story short, I had to make a choice. I said, okay, I can forego the big corporate opportunity, the back to your thing, the big fancy office, the all the corporate things, right? And stay with this franchise that again wasn't really my fit, although it was again profitable. Or I could sell the franchise, including, by the way, I had a master service agreement. So I actually had other franchises under me too. So I could sell all that and then focus on my corporate career. And at that stage in my life, again, I'm not going to say it was a wrong decision. I think it was a right decision. But long story short, I decided to sell the franchise and the master service agreement and everything and focus on my corporate career, and that's how that ended after a couple years.
Oh, well, when we talk about mistakes, one of the things that I have noticed that keeps on repeating itself is problems with the IRS. And I'm like paranoid as far as the IRS is concerned. And I see a lot of especially my construction guys, just ignoring that. In some states, their services require a sales tax. In other states, they don't. And often they end up in trouble with the state sales tax and or the IRS because they haven't either reported that correctly, paid it, or they have kept the money for themselves. Charged the tax and just thought, oh, who will know? And then they kept the money for themselves. And in Pennsylvania, our Pennsylvania sales tax people are aggressive. I had a client who was a doctor, and he just never thought that they would bother him. And we came one day, and I was doing some consulting on fixing things in his practice, and he'd been padlocked. They told him, and he just could not believe that happened to him. So that is a serious mistake that could have been avoided if he'd have paid attention to his advisors. And that was a lesson to me of like, ooh, when they get mad, look what they can do. I mean, they did it. And he couldn't, they attached his accounts. He couldn't do anything until he made an agreement. And just by the grace of God, they said, they wouldn't take him into selling everything off. He made an agreement that he would pay so much a month, but that almost destroyed his practice. And just the idea, because he was a doctor, that people would, because he was selling products that were taxable, that they wouldn't close his doors was, like I say, a big shock, not only to him, but also to me. And anytime I had to tangle later on with the sales tax division of any state, I just said, folks, they are aggressive. They're worse than the IRS. And we've had some encounters that could have been avoided. Do you ever run into things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, let me say two things on that, based on my experience. One is, sometimes, it's somebody that says, oh, they'll never catch me, they'll never figure this out, I'm too small, whatever, so I'm not going to worry about it. I've actually seen more cases of the business owner starts to get in trouble because businesses goes up and down, and things are good sometimes and things are bad now, and again, people can figure it out by the date we're recording, but I think we're in a bad period right now. We're going to have a couple of bad months coming up ahead. And then the business owner goes into the mentality of, okay, I'm not going to pay these taxes now, but I don't have to worry about it because in a month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, things will be okay. Things will be even better. This guy promised me this big order. And when that happens, I'll have all this money so I can go back and clean it up, and there's no harm, no foul. Unfortunately, what my experience has been is that payday never happens, or even if it does happen, by the time it happens, they're so deep into the hole that then eventually they become like an ostrich, hiding their head in the ground. They don't even want to look at their accounting numbers to figure out now what taxes they owe and what bills are out there, and prioritize things. So I think the mistake is quite honestly a psychological mistake, thinking that things are bad now, but they're going to get better in the future, and you'll be able to catch up and and again, no harm, no foul, and then transitioning to, okay, now it's so bad, I don't even want to look at it anymore. So again, that's the mistake to avoid is falling into that psychology and pulling the trigger early on whatever it is you have to do to fix it before it snowballs, before it gets out of control, and before it gets so bad um, that you don't even want to look at it because you're scared to look at it or frustrated or whatever. And maybe the only other point that I will say is, by the way, I agree with you in the sense that um, I do stuff in Western PA and Ohio and West Virginia. And funny enough, when there's issues with the taxes, a lot of times it's the state agency that the state taxing authority that figures it out and gets on the case even before the IRS.
Mm.
I don't know if it's because maybe they've got their ear closer to the ground or they just need the money more or whatever. I'm not sure what triggers that. But I do agree with you that as much as people fear the IRS and the IRS can be very tough and very aggressive, the states sometimes are the ones leading the charge. So don't forget about those guys.
Right, and even your local tax authorities, and I think it's because they need more money and they have to justify their job, can be very aggressive. I just went through, my business partner died last year, and uh, some of the things that needed to be done the last few months were not done, and I was so busy trying to keep things running and also be a support to the family that I didn't realize that our quarterly taxes, actually going back several quarters, had not been filed correctly. Well, I had to take care of that, and that, as of right now, but that took me months, and we didn't owe anything, but it took me months. I would put the zero in the wrong place or something, and back it would come, and I would talk to them, and oh lordy, it was unpleasant. I was ready to say, if I give you $1,000, will you go away? But those kind of little things can really sabotage you and take up your time a good bit, no matter who you are or how smart you think you are. It's always out there to prove that you're not as smart as you think you are.
Well, not only that, you made a good point, which I try to be very cognizant of. As a small business owner, your job and usually your skill set and where you're most productive and most valuable is to be out getting sales, dealing with customers, coming up with new deals and new business relationships and things like that. And if
Yeah.
you're spending an hour or two dealing with the IRS or dealing with any kind of bureaucracy, you figure out what kind of sales you could have done or what kind of business relationships you could have started in that time. You'll see that 1 or 2 hours is very costly in terms of foregone sales and business opportunities. So that's something that's important not to forget.
Mhm. And that goes to the next point of making sure that your accountant is on, and what I say is on your side. He understands, and he or she likes small business. They understand it. A lot of people get accountants who are doing big accounts, and they think that is going to be the big, the ticket for them. And you just may be too small. I've had clients making up to 300,000, 400,000, grossing $300,000, $400,000 a year. And to them, they're making a nice living. The business is employing a couple people, but to their accountant, they are small change. So that I think a good fit is having an accountant who actually likes small business. That is important.
And by the way, let me expand on that point because you hit on something that, again, I don't know if it rises to the level of a mistake, but it's important. What you just said, I think, is true for all your suppliers and all your vendors. no matter what business you're in, whether you're a restaurant or a beauty parlor or whatever. My recommendation is that part of your decision process to, again, engage with a vendor or even a customer is you have to make sure that on the one hand they're big enough that they can fulfill your needs. They have the tools, the capacity, the flexibility, the systems to fulfill your needs. But to your point, on the other hand, that they are not so big that you're not an important account for them and that you're going to get the attention and the help that you need when you get stuck or you need something that's maybe not in their normal course of business. So part of the dance and the thought process is how do I fit in within this vendor's suppliers or even customers scheme of life, so it's like a dance and we match up well with each other.
Right, that's a very good point. And that brings me to my notes here where the right banker is really important. Um, the banker who likes small business, who has confidence in you and is willing to spend some time getting to know you and not just a number that you are that drives up his bonus that he gets another account is really important. I have had a number of my clients that I've literally, when we sat and met with the banker and we're trying to get financing, I've just said, you're not going to get it. I mean, how long has this loan been here that he keeps on blaming on the back room and you have to do one or hurdle, you have to do one more jump. I said, you're not going to get it. And then I would go out and matchmake bankers to my client. And it was really like a matchmaking service. So if that banker liked their business, took a shine to what they were doing, that was important because they would tell them what's needed and how to do it before they would submit the package. And I have often seen small business owners just literally dragged out for months when you know darn well it's going to be a no. So getting a banker who is going to be straight with you, and I've had a few of them that when I take the deal to them, they say, I like the deal, but I know the back room is not. This is our criteria right now. And banks' criteria changes often depending on their numbers and what type of businesses are making it and what type of businesses are failing. So finding the right bank, finding the right banker, finding the right products. And if you have to pay a point or two, that's a lot better than going for the lowest point and then having a banker who's just going to throw you to the wolves when it's no longer convenient for him. And they will throw you to the wolves. There are some that do that. Have you experienced that?
Oh yeah, let me tell you, I used to actually appreciate a banker very much, and this may seem a little counterintuitive, but it was uh, he emphasized this as a positive for him, and I accepted it as a positive for him, and he would always go and say, listen, if I need to give you a no, it's going to be a fast no, so
Yeah.
you know, and you don't get dragged out for months. To your point, and he would always say that, and again, I would appreciate it as a positive because if he says no, at least I know where I stand. I don't waste any time, and I go on to try to negotiate with a different banker. The only other thing that I'll say in that respect is, especially for the smaller deals, a lot of banks are not trying. They've moved to these automated systems where you just basically put data into the computer and there's not even a human there. The computer says, "Yep, okay, we're going to make this loan," and no, we're not going to make this loan. And um, that's fine if you're one of those few people that all your numbers look good and the computer's going to give you an A plus. But my experience is, to be honest with you, there's a ton of deals out there and a ton of situations where the computer is not going to let you go through. But if you have the opportunity, and maybe it's me also maybe being a little bit old school, but if you have an opportunity to sit down with the person and explain, listen, okay, this one number doesn't look very good because it's this or that, or, sometimes just ask the question, okay, this, I agree, this is a red flag. How can we mitigate it? Is there something we can do? Whatever. Um, if you are given the opportunity to have those discussions, um, you stand a much greater chance of getting that loan as opposed to simply just putting numbers into the computer and letting the algorithm do its thing. And maybe the only other last thing I'll say is, um, even when you talk about SBA guaranteed loans as an example, which are used a lot for business, banks are not monolithic. I mean, and they told me this kind of privately. Sometimes they'll say, "Hey, listen, we're not going to lend on this deal," not because there's anything bad with the deal. Maybe it's a restaurant or a car dealership or a pharmacy, whatever. It's just we've already made a lot of loans in that area, and we as a bank want to be diversified. So we don't want to have 10 loans to pharmacies. We want to have a loan to a pharmacy, one to a car dealership, one to a clothing retail store, and so you get rejected and you think it's you, and it's got nothing to do with you. It's purely the timing and the coincidence that they've already made a lot of loans in that industry. So you just need to go to a different bank that hasn't made that many loans in that industry, and for them it's actually good because again they're going to view it as diversifying from whatever else they have.
Right. I've often asked the bankers I'm they're good business associates of mine and say, well, where do I take this? And they'll often lead me and pick up the phone and make the introduction because I've said, where will I take this?
Yeah.
And so that I have learned that if you've been turned down once, it's, it doesn't mean it's the end. Unless the credit is so bad and things are so bad that, every flag is there that no one's going to talk to you. But you're right. They have a portfolio that they look at least quarterly, if not more, of, okay, are we too heavy in restaurants? Are we too heavy in beauty shops? Are we too heavy in whatever it is? And then they will go into diversification, just like a stock portfolio. Are you diversified? Spread the risk.
Yeah, no, and I'll tell you what, same thing happens to me. And every individual, not even to say every organization, every individual has a different mindset, right? But if I deal with a banker that says, hey, listen, I can't make the loan, and maybe they don't even tell you the reason, it's one of these, but they're not, whatever, don't want to disclose it, that's fine. But if they say, hey, listen, I know that so and so bank or so and so person is looking at these situations more favorably, you know, I'm going to go back to that banker again in the future with my next deal. It's not like, some of them may see it as, oh my God, I'm sending a customer away and sending him to the competition and he'll never come back. I actually view it as the opposite. We're developing a stronger relationship. So because you've helped me. So next time that I have a deal, I'll run it by you first. And then maybe you can do the next one with me. And, that's just how it is.
Yeah. Relationships are important. And I think that today in the technology, people forget that. But more than ever, relationships are important. You got some computer algorithm running in the background that I need to know that. And I ask that right up front. Okay, how are decisions made? Who makes the decisions? And that's another point, that not getting enough information about who you're dealing with and what their process is, and that you may very well be unwittingly putting yourself in a bad light because you don't know the process. And if you do know the process, you can make decisions about, okay, can I fit that process, or is this going to be a lot of time just wasted? Government loans are often a way to go during a time of crisis, but it does not happen easily. Does not for it doesn't turn over. I mean, as slow as the bank can be, believe me, I've sat on a couple of government boards, and we meet monthly. And some months they don't have enough cases to bring forward to, and so your loan, which is part of a whole package, is just put on the back burner. So you really need to know the process of what other lending organization or association that you're working with that's trying to get the money. Because if you need money yesterday and you're dealing with the government, it's very rare that you're going to get it yesterday. Have you experienced that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's why, by the way, maybe it's important when times are good to develop, number one, the banking relationship, but and number two, correlated to that, maybe even more important, a line of credit that you can draw on, because you never know when times are going to get bad and when times are going to get bad suddenly. And to your point, when times get bad, you may not have time to go through all the hoops and all the negotiations and all the figuring out. You need to have that line of credit there ready to go from the good times, because that's what's going to save you. And maybe even if it's just to tide you over to then you can get some other type of financing. But yeah, the recommendation there would be always, if possible, during good times, get yourself a good line of credit that you can use for an emergency.
Yeah. One of the things that I get very leery of, and I have a client that I think we're going to be into an emergency, is, well, the loan is we're just waiting for the final paperwork. And I start talking to her and I says, how long have you been waiting for the final paperwork? As soon as I see that, I hear those words, I go, oh crap. You know, that something's wrong. I mean, they've had the paperwork stalled now for at least a month. No, something's wrong. And I wanted her to start. I said, wait a minute, let's start looking right now, because something's amiss. You already have a lot of business with them, and you have some nice assets which are quickly being used up because you're starting this expansion project, and you are using your line of credit. But if we don't get this remortgaged, you're going to be really stressed out. And that is a clue that if the paperwork's not coming as fast, unless you've asked for an increase in the loan or something like that, that is something that you have to be very leery of.
Yeah.
Because
No,
people
I agree completely. I had a case a while back, and and in fairness, the credit score was very marginal, so okay. But going back to what I was saying earlier, and this was a microloan. This was like $50,000, okay, for a veteran. And instead of giving the quick no and just saying, hey guys, look, I'm sorry, the credit score is just not there, whatever the case may be, they dragged it out for 3 months. And when they had said we have all the paperwork, right? Because of course, again, if you don't have all the paperwork, then fine, the ball's in the court of the client to get the paperwork into the bank. But once all the paperwork is there, that they admit that all the paperwork is there, they dragged it out for 3 months on a $50,000 loan, and then at the end of the 3 months, they said, "Oh, by the way, we're not lending." And meantime, this person, again, right, wrong, or indifferent, and maybe you can call it a mistake, whatever. They didn't do anything with anybody else. It just kind of sat there and tried to survive for 90 days, thinking this was going to come through, because they had even, quite honestly, been giving verbal assurances that this was going to be okay, and then 90 days down the road, they get the letter saying, nope, you don't get your 50,000.
Yeah, yeah, that can happen, and that can really give you a real kick in the gut, and sometimes that will force the doors to be closed because you have used up your resources, and they're gone.
Yeah. Well, not only that, now when you go to the next bank, you look even worse. because everything has degraded for 3 months, which for a small business can be a very long period of time.
Yeah. So, well, we've been talking at least 40 minutes. So, I'm not sure when the next Friday the 13th is, but do you have anything else you want to add as far as a note or anything like that?
Well, I just want to add, I got my little cheat sheet here. So, by the way, I'll show it on the computer there. Um, and I'll just mention two things briefly in closing, and maybe we can discuss these in more detail in the future and talk about some case studies and whatnot. But it goes back to, again, we're recording this on Friday the 13th in March of 2020. I expect because of the coronavirus, because of oil prices, because of everything that's going on, the next 2 or 3 months, if not more, are going to be challenging. So one mistake maybe to avoid is, and everything's a balancing act. Okay, that's why again, there's no right or wrongs in business, but the balancing act is, on the one hand, you want to keep your employees on board, even though business is soft, because hiring, retraining, finding these employees, the bad part and the reputational problems of everything, of laying off people, all that is terrible. But on the flip side, don't make the mistake of keeping employees on too long when things are going really bad, because instead of trimming your workforce so that you can survive the next 90 days and maybe rehire them or rehire other people and turn things around, everything may go under. So be very careful with that balancing act between doing the trimming or the layoffs or even cost reductions in other areas that you need to do, uh, versus trying to hold on too long and then the whole boat capsizes. Um, so maybe that's the one thing I'll say, and again, that's maybe another longer topic for another day.
Mhm. Well, one thing I want to say is that if you can support your local small businesses, instead of running to, if there's a local hardware store, instead of running to the great big box stores, and often it may be just a little more expensive, and sometimes it's just about the same. Uh, Please go to your local store. Take a look at what your patterns are and support your small business. Uh, like today, I'm going to a local small restaurant. I'm meeting a friend. I'm not going into hiding or anything like that, because the more I look at the statistics, uh, it's serious, but it is not, at the reaction that often the media, and their stock will be fine. So I get live your life and take normal precautions and support your small business. Take a look at your habits. You'd be surprised at how many places that you could go and shop small business. So,
Yep, and they're the ones that are going to go out of their way to help you when you have a problem. By the way, because the big box stores, the big businesses, they have their policy manual, and they're not going to deviate from that when you need help.
no, they're not. And so we thank you for doing the technology. And we wish everyone well, and we wish that, as my friends in South Dakota say, keep calm, cool, and collected. You never know when the next tornado is coming, so why run around in circles right now? So,
Well, thank you very much, JoAnn. Pleasure chatting with you.
thank you.